Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad, here with Doug.
Hey.
Doug just finished up Remnant from the Ashes.
Yeah, it's so generic. What a generic title.
It's and see, okay, so it is. And this is one of those games, and we talked about it when I talked about Get Even a couple months ago.
Yeah.
This is one of those games, I think, to you where you just saw it and you're like, I want to play that. And
Yeah.
here we are, like, whenever later, and you're like, oh, I'll get to it eventually, I'll get to it eventually, I'll get to it eventually,
Yeah.
I'll get to it eventually. And then you finally get to it.
Yes. Well, it came out free on Epic Game Store. That's how I finally got to it.
So, I gave this game a try
Yeah.
in a similar manner on Xbox Game Pass
Yeah.
a couple months back because
Yeah.
Doug kept saying, like, you got to try it. Tell me if it's good. Tell me if it's good. Tell me if it's good. Tell me if it's good.
Yeah, because I had understood it as like a Dark Soulsy shooter thing. I didn't tell you it was a Dark Soulsy thing. I was just like, I think the shooting was good, so let's see how far Brad gets into this before he turns it off.
So, to start with my brief impressions, he said, play it. So I did at like 11 o'clock at night. I was just like, all right, whatever. I'll throw it on for an hour or two.
Sure.
Played it, and I think I just texted you, don't play this. It's super boring. And I just remember all I did for like an hour or two was just walk around this building while they told me things were horrible, like flipping switches to turn power on and checking garbage trucks or something. I don't even remember.
You're turning on a reactor. It's very, very generic video games.
Yes. It felt super generic. Just like, I'm like, flip this switch. Okay, now go turn that on. Make sure the bridge is up. Make sure so-and-so has their gun. And it's just that. And then I got outside and was like, okay, this just, I'm not interested. I can't. It's this. I've seen this 100 times before. Whatever. And I stopped and said, Doug, don't play this.
And it is so funny because I think that is a totally correct impression to have of this game to start. This game does buries the lead way, way, way too deep. It is a game that I will say definitely starts generic, and it starts dropping little hints that, wait a second, this is not what I thought this game was. Wait a second. Wait, what do you mean? Oh, shit. And by the end, it's an entirely different game with this super, super cool universe. I feel like I do need to kind of spoil like some stuff near the very beginning. So you're right. It starts, you are in a generic post-apocalyptic wasteland. You'll notice the shooting is super good. It's really fun. It's super awesome. I love how
I do think I told you that I felt good.
It feels
I remember
amazing.
it feeling good.
It feels amazing. The guy who did the Darksiders 2 combat. So anyway, so basically it's this post-apocalyptic world. I would say the only thing that's not generic at first is that instead of zombies, they're all these creatures that are based on this thing called the Root, quote unquote, the Root.
Yep.
And so it's all these sort of plant-based zombie monsters and stuff, which is all not very exciting. So, So anyway, you pick up this. There's an item that you get really early on called the key card, and it opens up some place in your main base. And I was like, okay, sure. At this point, I was like, okay, I've seen post-apocalyptic games. And you go in this thing, and it's one of those generic labs you see, and like a bunch. You go into computers, and like you start reading stuff about these computers. And now I'm going to spoil the stuff that's kind of interesting. So I was just expecting it's like, oh, we're experimenting on humans, blah 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 blah. But they start talking about this concept called the Dreamers, and this is what this whole universe is sort of based on. It's what it is they had a group of people, and what they would do, they would put them to sleep to dream. And they would dream and then transport their minds into a parallel universe, and then hook their brains into like kind of like Avatar, I guess is probably the easiest way to say it, like into another creature from that universe. But what it is, so you're reading these things, and it's talking about all these different universes. Like there's a universe of these fuzzy creatures they call the Fuzzies. There's this universe that's all ice. There's this universe that's like, they just say it's an organic planet, and like when you walk around, it's like human skin or something like that. It's like really strange. I was just like, what is this game actually about? So what the game kind of is, it's a post-apocalyptic game at first, but really what it's like, it's really similar to Stargate, because you actually start going to these different universes. You start seeing different things, and it's kind of hard to talk about without spoiling. But there's a part in the game when suddenly it shifts, like a really, really hard shift. There's a very, very cool scene that I don't want to spoil. When it suddenly shifts from this kind of generic-y shooter, open world, post-apocalyptic game into an entirely different game. And it opens up all these universes. And suddenly by the end of the game, I was summoning monsters. I was shooting at guns that was shooting bones out of it. I was wearing a mask that was driving my character mad. And And then like it's not like I'm just shooting zombies anymore. I'm shooting snakes that look like centipedes. I'm shooting elves. I'm shooting fauna. Like sorry, not, I'm shooting fawns and like all these sort of cool creatures. And the thing that's cool is just the game keeps changing as it went along. That's why I kept wanting to play and play and play because I was so excited to see the next area, the next monster, the next thing. Like I feel like all of the monster designs was something I'd never seen before.
That's cool.
There's like a zone that's very similar to it's like a Stargate fans ripoff thing, but every time you go into a new zone, it's there's like two competing factions or two the competing universes at play. So there's this one I was going to. It's kind of like generic. Well, not generic. It's kind of like H.R. Geiger meets Stargate, but in that same universe, there's also zombies with hornet nest heads that are spitting out radioactive bees, and then there's also mummies running around. It is so fucking cool.
See, now this is the issue because in my mind, when I stopped playing this, having done exactly zero research on this game, just going, Doug said play it, downloading it on Game Pass and playing it.
Yeah.
If you were to describe that and give me 1,000 guesses of which video game you're talking about, I never in a million years would have guessed it was this game because that opening just feels so go kill the zombies.
Sure. Yeah, no, it does. It's super boring. It's not great. Like I'd say the opening is not great. The opening is like, but I think it's purposely boring because it's one of those things that I always felt. This is kind of like a dumb thing and maybe it's an excuse for other games, but I always feel like boring sections of games make the crazier sections more interesting as a result. I think Shadow of the Colossus is kind of like the epitome of this. Like it's boring running between colossi, and then when you get to the just give me a sec. When you get to the colossi, it's a big point. But the difference here is that you only have to go through running through that field one time, which is the opening. And then as soon as you meet the first Colossus, then it turns into an entirely different game. And I think it's really cool. It's like, it's not just I think the one thing I thought was like, oh, it's a Dark Souls game. It's like, well, it's actually more a Diablo game that uses the Dark Souls. It's kind of like Darksiders where it's like, it keeps pulling all these interesting things and kind of mixing them together in this kind of neat little ball of like weird different concepts. So it's like a Diablo game through the lens of a Dark Souls game, through the lens of that fun Darksiders lore.
That's cool.
It is amazing. It is so fun. And I think the thing that's like really cool, like one of the things I really love about the game is, so I haven't even talked about the gameplay. Like I think the world is really exciting. But the gameplay that's really cool is you don't really collect a lot of like weapons. You don't collect a lot of armor, but you collect a lot of weapons and skills. And so what you're doing is you're swapping out skills, which is basically like your kind of like your special power. But like, how do I explain this? So for example, when I'm running around the field, I'm sitting there summoning a bunch of monsters. And when I get to a boss, it's like, actually summoning a bunch of monsters isn't working here. Let me swap out all of my skills. So now I'm playing totally differently now because all my skills are different. And to just to fight this boss. And it was really cool because I kept swapping different skills. So I was finding like, oh, when I play this way in this area, it's super effective. But now this way I've been playing the game isn't effective in this other area. So you're like swapping skills, and the reason I kept playing and playing and playing is because like every time I got to a new area, I had to swap out how I was playing the game. So it's the gameplay is constantly changing. So it's kind of like it's not a puzzle game per se, but it is like I'm constantly swapping out how I play the game to go along. So I feel like I feel like there's some games where it's like this is how you play the game, and you play this game through the entire game. In this one, it's like I kept playing differently as I kept going through the game. And that's what kept my interest is I have to keep playing the game differently.
So when you say that, are you saying like tactics wise, are you saying, so like when you're switching out these skills and everything, is it like switching out like, I guess, materia in like Final Fantasy VII where you're basically just changing like the stat and what your character can do? Like you're playing more aggressive, more defensive, or is it like completely like I'm doing something brand new?
It's like I'm doing something brand new. I'll give you an example of the thing I don't like. I have to fight a fire. I'll give you an example of what I think I don't like in like RPGs. I need to fight a fire boss, so I got to load up on all my fire resistant armor and then equipped a ice spell or something like that.
Yeah.
But I'll give you an example of one of the later bosses I was playing. And what was happening is I had brought in my summon animals, like I'm going to kill this boss, but the boss was kind of up in the air. My summon animals weren't doing anything, so I died. I was like, well, shit, that's the thing I've been doing the entire time. But I noticed that the way it was attacking, it's like it had these projectiles. I was having a really hard time dodging. So I got a skill that created a protective bubble around me. And all of a sudden, now those projectiles aren't an issue. And
okay, so
there's a part where like it would kind of fall down on the ground, and I was like, oh well, now I can actually set my summon things after it, or maybe I can actually put on like a status effect on it or something like that. So I need a skill that will put a status effect on when it falls down. So it's kind of like it's a puzzle. It's kind of like a puzzly aspect to it of not just
like more like
brute
changing.
force.
It's almost more like changing classes.
Yes.
Essentially, as
Yes.
you go. So you're going from like the tank to like, okay, maybe now I'm playing more range. Now I'm doing more defensive, whatever it might be. You're kind of bouncing between classes as you go through each one of these worlds.
Yeah, and you're picking from like a library of skills to do that. So it's like you're picking from a toolbox.
Yeah. How many skills can you have at once? Because it sounds like that's like
only 2.
Okay, so like in the instance you gave, you have like your bubble, shield, and your summon monsters.
Yeah, and you equip them to the gun. So you have 2 guns, and I can equip a skill to each gun, sort of thing.
Oh, okay. So okay.
Yeah. Huh. It's kind of cool when you get like special guns and stuff. Like sometimes the special guns comes with a special skill in it that's only associated with that gun. You can't take it off. And sometimes those special weapons are really they're kind of like very specific situations, but sometimes they're just super fun to play with, kind of thing. It seemed like every gun had some sort of fun utility, and by the end of the game actually got easier as I went along, because I felt like every single skill I was getting was just more powerful than next, or some way I could kind of like cheese it in a certain way, or I could cheese my equipment in a certain way to give me like super criticals all the time. It's the stuff that I feel like takes 100 hours to do in Diablo, and you can do it in 10 hours here. It just gets you to the best part. Like it just gets you to that. Which is nice. If you play with these things, you max out your character in this one aspect of just doing critical damage, or just doing spell damage, or just doing this, or just doing that.
So did you find like having like outside of bosses, is there just like a main one you would go, or is it one of those games where like every time you get it, that one is more powerful? Because I guess there's, you know what I mean? Like there's some games I'm thinking where that first gun and skill that you have, by the time you get 5 hours in, is completely worthless.
I fought the final boss with the first 2 guns I got in the game.
Did you use them the whole time in between?
No.
Or you like went back to them?
No, I found
okay, that's cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. It's really funny because like sometimes the gun like I started with, it would be like there's this one gun I had, it's just called a coach gun. It was kind of like a mid-range shotgun, and I loved that gun, and I was using it and using it and using it, and then like halfway through the game I got a gun that's just more fun to play, and I was like, but it took a lot of convincing for me to swap guns. But then I found out the coach gun for specific situations was more useful. So you're not just tossing guns aside. Like you are kind of like every situation you're figuring out like what the best one to use is. And all the enemies are super fun to fight, and they're super weird. It's not just like fighting generic guys with guns. They're all doing kind of weird, crazy shit. So it's just a fun game that I would just say is just constantly surprising me, both from a gameplay aspect, from a story aspect, from a universe aspect. The only thing I don't like is the ending is not finished at all.
Well, so peaks in the middle is what I'm hearing here. Bad beginning, bad ending.
Yes. Great middle.
Good.
It's a 10-hour game. It's got a good 9 hours.
I mean, hey, 9 out of 10 hours is pretty good odds for most games, I think.
Yeah. No, it's a super cool game. I think it's like one of those super underrated games. It kept reminding me of Darksiders, of just like this game I had very middling expectations going into, and just like everything about it I love. It's not perfect.
Those are always good ones.
I just want to have its Darksiders 2 moment. Like where I went for Darksiders 1, I need a Remnant 2, because there's a lot of stuff to fix. But it's just a ton of fun. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, we are Workforce Gaming. You can follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming. Subscribe to us wherever you're listening, and we'll see you later.
Bye.